Mitchell Stankovic and Associates and the Underground Ideas into Action presents The Underground Chats, authentic conversations with credit union thought leaders. Today's chat, Balance and Adaption, with Stephen Bohanon, founder and chief strategy and sales officer with Alchemy.
So, Stephen, great to see you. I'm excited to chat with you again. I feel like it's wonderful to come back and kind of catch up where we left off last year and see how everyone's doing at Alchemy. And I really wanted to start there. We talked earlier about what you were seeing with the pandemic and what you anticipated with it and the digital transformation that was just abruptly put on all of us. So where I am today is like, what were your takeaways from 2020?
In terms of how, as far as our business and kind of our customers in the digital banking space, we definitely saw more digital banking usage. So we saw, generally speaking, our customers were, in the 12 to 13% a year as far as increase of digital banking users. This year, I think they were somewhere around 17%, something like that. So that obviously was an uptick. You probably had some laggards that maybe were used to going into the branches for certain things that finally couldn't go into the branches, so they had to register online. We definitely saw like our average number of logins increase per week, so people are just accessing the app more, and that's probably again because of lack of access of the physical channels. So those users, and then actually using it more often every per week. Probably the biggest shift that I know about in terms of with our customers was them getting used to this where, like think about call centers, right? You go to a typical call center, especially a large institution, these are generally smaller kind of cubes, pretty close to each other, and so not really set up for social distancing. And so I think probably one of the biggest trends we saw was call centers being staffed from their homes and then having to have some tools. So we have a partnership with a company called Glia, that actually we saw some sales uptake in that quite a bit around that time because it's a full kind of cloud-based solution. So it basically allows the MSR to be anywhere and to be able to log in and take chat sessions, take calls, video calls, and everything else. So that's probably one of the biggest things I saw as far as besides shutting down the branches is then even the back office operations where normally you have a big bank of cubes. Well, what do you do now? And then having to have the technology to be able to have them work from the home as well. So those are some of the observations, I guess, or some of the trends that we saw from last year at a high level.
So from the standpoint of call volume, I'm curious, did it go through the roof there for a period of time, or did people transition to the home banking platforms?
That's a good question. I'm not as close to it to be able to give you the great metrics. Like we kind of hear anecdotes from various customers. Absolutely, the call volume went up initially whenever, obviously when branches are shutting down and stuff. And that's where I think a lot of the call center reps and others were directing people to, download the mobile app, go online and do these functions. So I think you had a lot of the employees of the credit unions that were, directing their members to kind of use these channels. So you had some of that. I think the other, and then some of them, for instance, if they didn't have the technology, so if they haven't purchased the technology that allows the MSRs to work for home, well, then they were having issues because they're trying to staff their call center, but ensure that no more than X amount of people could be in there at any one time and had to be spaced out. And so they were having to kind of get used to that. And we saw that for probably kind of that first 30 days, maybe 30 to 60 days. And then people kind of started to kind of figure out, what it was they're going to do. I would say the biggest driver for calls was really around all the stimulus check and the PPP loan programs, and so we were hearing reports of calls in high abandonment rates, long call times, people calling to check. We saw it on our system as far as people logging into the system. We were seeing volumes. Let's say like a normal day, generally, let's say around 30% or so of the users would log into the system, or a number of logins per membership. And then like on a peak day, maybe that goes up to 40 to 50%. Well, then whenever we had these stimulus checks, when those were announced being hit, we were getting like 40% volume above the peak days. Wow. People logging in dozens of times a day, trying to see whether or not their check had hit. Obviously, lighting up the call centers, waiting in queue, trying to find out if their check had hit. So I would say that actually probably created, there's kind of two events. There was one kind of in the April timeframe, and then another kind of really at the end of last year, beginning of this year. So those are times where obviously we saw massive volume that like we had never seen before in digital banking.
So it's fascinating. The one that hit later in the year is also the one that really tipped the scale, if you will, with the number of deposits that came into the credit union industry, because obviously members consider them safe harbors. So we've seen unprecedented growth. Take just a minute and tell us about Alchemy. Sometimes I jump into this and I think, oh, everybody knows what you do, but you have a significant market presence. And so I just, take a minute and tell us what you guys do.
Okay, so Alchemy, we're a digital banking software provider. So we basically offer digital banking solutions, which is obviously online, mobile, voice, SMS, chat, and so forth. So our platform basically is kind of the storefront for the financial institution. So consumers and businesses, when they want to interact with their financial institution, typically somewhere in the 90+% of interactions start in our channel. And then our job is to help enable a financial institution to basically make everything self-service that they offer, right? So as part of that, we interface to 15 to 20 back office systems per client, core, card, mortgage, bill paid, e-statements, ACH wire, all these things, in order to be able to facilitate kind of anytime, anywhere, kind of a self-service banking access for consumers and businesses. So instead of financial institutions trying to build these systems and support these systems and integrate with all their other systems on their own, they rely on companies like Alchemy in order to offer that as kind of a white label, or we offer it as white label, and then the customers, we publish apps, we have the online banking site and all those kinds of things, and the customers basically market it as their own and use that to serve their members.
Well, I've been hearing, tons about you in the marketplace, and I have many clients that are, users, partners with you, in addition to the fact that they're going through conversions this year. And I think it became very clear to everyone. And one of the comments that you made when we were together last was, take a look at your technology budgets. So when I did strategic planning all year, I made them all take a look at their technology budgets and make sure there was enough in there to cover what they were, compare it to what they were doing in the branches. So your words really had an effect, and I just wanted to reinforce that. And sometimes we don't take enough time to understand or to let everybody know what you guys are up to. We came into the new year, I think, thinking, okay, 2020 is behind us. And we're going to be moving forward. And I think we're definitely moving forward, but the question is how? We've got social divide in the country, we have technology divide, and yesterday we did a session with our directors, and part of their discussion was how to make digital more friendly, how are we going to engage, how are we going to get technology to the kids, and so I just wanted to get your ideas with this growing digital divide. How do you think credit unions can, help with bridging that gap?
The divide between people
that, like, for instance, we have a schools credit union in Las Vegas and Clark County, and they helped with the county in getting laptops out or getting computers out. And I know you and I've seen that across the country. When you look at the virtual world, there's not always parity or equality when it comes to access to technology. And you're on that front end. You're seeing how people are using their technology today. So do you anticipate that we'll continue to increase that volume? Is it going to be more of a hybrid solution today? What are your financial institutions saying to you about that?
Well, in terms of, you mean helping do their part to get access to everyone so that there's kind of equal access to these things? Yeah, I think obviously credit unions this is kind of part of their mission, right? And their reason for existing is to help their community and to, kind of look out for the little guy, so to speak. So I think that, and you do see this all across the country with credit unions, obviously offering their resources to help, and whether that be through donation or that be through kind of supporting micro lending and financing plans and things like that. So I think that that's probably the best way, because especially in the work from home, everyone thinks about, well, we work from home, that's fine. Doesn't everyone have high-speed internet and a laptop with a camera on it and everything? No, not everybody does have that, right? And so I think that whatever we can do from a credit union perspective, whatever we can do to ensure that people have access to those things and that they have, whether they be, kind of like the old Chromebooks where it's just a kind of a web-based computer or tablets or whatever, and ensuring that they can do whatever they can to get access to everyone that needs that. Because yeah, I mean, you talk about the disproportionate effect that the pandemic has had on those that don't have means, right? Maybe whether it be access to healthcare in some cases or access to technology and things like that. And I think to your point, it just widens that gap even further, right? Like, so now if I grow up in maybe a disadvantaged neighborhood or a disadvantaged household, and really, I was really counting on my education and my schooling, to help get me out of this, right? And to help give me a leg up. And now, all the other kids who are already advantaged, they can still go to school, they can still learn, but maybe I can't, or I can't learn in the same way. So it actually just increases that. So I don't think it's just credit unions. I think it's banks. I think it's companies like Alchemy. I think it's everyone that as a country, we all have a responsibility to recognize that and do what we can to ensure that that doesn't happen. So I just happen to think credit unions are some of the most well-positioned because they already think that way, right? It's just kind of part of their makeup and their DNA. But absolutely, it's very, very important that we focus on things like that, or else it's just going to get worse. You're going to see it. And then it'll be interesting to see, if and I'm sure people will do studies on this, years from now, where they'll look back and they'll see if there's, what kind, they'll look at the metrics and they'll see what kind of effect this ultimately has had on all kinds of things. But yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you that whatever we can to get the technology, because the technology can really be a great equalizer, just like the technology is an equalizer between a $1 billion credit union and $100 billion bank or something like that. It can be an equalizer for individuals as well.
Absolutely. In fact, we call it the digital divide for that reason, that having access to technology provides us that, in essence, it can be the virtual experience and create an environment where everyone has a chance. I was interested in looking at the idea that we have a whole generation that are now going to school in some type of a hybrid, but in most cases still virtual. And now they're growing up with a system, and I'm going to keep an eye on what happened with Clark County and our other credit unions that have done it, because they've allowed them to now make that connection. And with your services being on that front end, I know that I read recently that Alchemy has a project that they're going to be working on with financial education. Am I correct in that?
Well, I'm not sure. We have a lot of initiatives going on. So we do some things in our platform where we actually offer financial literacy content within our platform. So with learning about the basics of financial products and tools and things like that. So we kind of have we have partnered with a company like years ago that creates hundreds and hundreds of pieces of articles and videos and so forth. So that's something that several of our clients actually leverage. Other clients, they have their own programs that they partner with, and they do things like that. So that is something. And ultimately, what they're doing is they're leveraging the content management system within our platform to do that. The same content management system they use to market products, they can use it to obviously target financial literacy content to users. The other thing that we do specifically on the other point that you're talking about when we were talking about kind of lessening the divide is we've enhanced our partnership with a company called Perscolis. So this is something that we do as a company, and Perscolis basically is a program for people that come from what they call like non-traditional backgrounds that generally don't have any sort of tech education or skills like that. And Perscolis actually offers them like a scholarship basically to go through. It's almost like a tech school, like a vocational technical school. And so they'll train them, for instance, like how to do IT support, how to be a software developer, those types of things. So they rely upon companies like Alchemy to support that. And so we do that not only to be able to pay for the education that they're getting, but then ultimately they become a feeder into us for our hiring. And so we've had the good fortune to be able to hire several Perscolis graduates and are continuing to do that. And that's something we do on a corporate level. It has nothing really to do with our product, but that may have been something you heard about as well, is that, we've been doing that for years, but about a year ago, we really kind of stepped up our involvement in that.
Again, thank you for that response. One of the the special parts of being a credit union advocate, which all of us are, is these special partners. And it seems like our partners have the same commitment to goodwill of working with people, changing lives. And so there was an example, and I wanted to bring that up because quite often we don't look at the bigger system, the ecosystem of a financial institution. And when we have partners that are also committed to the initiatives that all of us believe in, and it made me think of something else that I wanted to share. We've been working with a lot of employee resource groups, and I think you're aware that I work with World Council and the Global Women's Leadership Network. And one of the areas that we're going to be more focusing on is about women in technology. And I was fascinated when you were talking there about given the opportunities. We were talking to a CIO, frankly, of AT&T, and she was telling me that when she works with, and then the CIO at Connecta, and she says she does volunteer work, and she finds that the young women at about the age of 12 or 13 will start to turn away from math because they're not as encouraged. And so she's been doing some mentoring programs around getting them to be excited about math. And with Black History Month, I was reading about all of the African American women that have contributed to the sciences. And it's just a little bit of a tangent on my part, but something that I'm excited to see your involvement.
It's important. Yeah. I mean, at Alchemy, I mean, we track some of these things. I think we're about, I don't know the latest stats, our chief people officer would probably correct me, but we're somewhere in the 33% women. And in tech, that's actually really good in tech. And you look at healthcare, it's the opposite, right? But it's something that it's not a problem that fixes itself if you just let it organically try to fix itself. You actually have to be pretty intentional about it because we're humans. We tend to like to go with what's familiar to us and what we know. And so, if you're intentional about it, you can make that difference there. And so I would say we're far from perfect on it. We have areas that we identify that we need to do better, especially with having females in leadership and some other areas. But it is something we're focused on and intentional about. And I would say that I'd be really careful to say that we won't ever put someone in a position or hire someone just because they're a female. That just won't happen. But ultimately, what you have to do, I think, as a company is, it's really easy for us when there's a position to fill to, if you're a hiring manager, you just want to fill that position as soon as you can, right? Because that's like one more thing on your list that you got to do, and you're underwater, and maybe the people that work for you, they're overburdened and so forth. And so you're trying to solve that problem. And especially in tech, when you put out a job posting, the overwhelming majority of the resumes you're going to get are from men. And so it's just a much easier decision to be able to say, oh my gosh, I've got let's say 100 resumes in and 80 or 90 of them are men. Great. And it's just easier to find them. And so I think the thing that you have to be able to be committed to is that it's going to take you sometimes a little bit longer, and you're going to go through, you're going to ensure that you interview people that not only have diversity of gender, but diversity of race, diversity of age, diversity of sexual orientation, those types of things. And you just have to be willing to be patient and to take the time, because if you do it as fast as possible, you'll always ultimately just look like you do today. I mean, because it's just the easiest decision. It's the least amount of effort, the quickest way to get to the solution. So I think that's where you really have to be intentional, is where you have to say, I'm going to take my time, because I believe that, there is a qualified female candidate that can actually be a great fit here. And it may, instead of being able to fill that job in a week or two, maybe it's going to take me a month or two, but I'm committed to doing that. And then what will happen is as you make those if you exercise that patience early on, then what you find is that it becomes easier and easier and easier. And then you do have more female candidates, because so many candidates self-select out. They look at a company and say, they obviously maybe aren't interested in me, so I won't even try to apply. So there's that effect as well. But and then we do things. We support kind of a local STEM programs and things. We obviously within our Perscolas, there's a lot of those candidates that are females, because a lot of that, when we say non-traditional backgrounds, a lot of that are people maybe single moms working in a daycare center, but that want to be able to do something else in their life, and then go through and get trained up on the technology skills, and then Alchemy being a place that they know they can get a job as part of that. So it's nothing we can fix overnight, but it is something that if you don't start on it, you'll never fix it. And so it has to be something you're committed to for the long term, we're seeing great results from it, and we just encourage others. And I will just tell you, a lot of our credit union clients, they're doing some of the same things. We share some of these success stories and things with them, and then they'll say, "Oh, we're going to adopt that," and then vice versa. They'll give us some tips of things they've done that worked, and then we'll adopt that. So I agree with you on that kind of the ecosystem of ideas and stuff. All trying to kind of, I love it when we have a lot of like-minded people that are able to kind of pool their resources together and then be able to kind of really make a difference. And we do see that happening at Alchemy and within our client community.
Well, and I would add the idea that's a big idea for me that you just talked about is the organic system you talked about. If you're working with an organization that's helping to develop and offering training and scholarships and truly becoming a farm system, if you will, of talent that you'll be able to develop, that's a perfect place. And maybe that's one of the things we want to share to everybody out there is, yes, we are all in the place of wanting to have more diversity of thought, diversity in all aspects. And there are certain types of diversity that are across all boundaries, right? And so I think when you look at this and you say, can we partner with other companies that become the company that certifies, that develops young people, community support programs, and so on. And I love the idea that you're doing that so that diversity can start with teenagers. It can start with single mothers. It can start with, fathers trying to pay the bills. So congratulations on that.
Yeah. And by the way,
some work there, and I want to highlight it.
Yeah, by the way, we're not the only ones that benefit from Perscolas, and we understand that. So, when we support the organization, we're ultimately making a difference in the lives of those individuals. And whether it be Alchemy, where they get that job, or it be some other one, we're fine. We're just happy for them. Now, sometimes we also benefit from it because these become great alchemists that go on to work for us and kind of move up the ranks within the company and make a big difference here. But even if it's not here, if it's somewhere else, or maybe they work at Alchemy for a couple of years, then they go and work somewhere else. So I think it's just important to do that type of thing, obviously. It's just like everything else is, we like to be part of things better or bigger than ourselves. And so it's a way that we as a company can do that and in some ways benefit from it as well.
Yes, and I think it's part of our culture. So congratulations on it. And I think it's an opportunity. I believe that doing the right thing becomes good business. And that's literally what we're talking about here in intern programs of credit unions, just because as we go on, this whole talent acquisition is going to be and your point about when we need the talent, we're going to reach out. So people have to be at the table and available to us. So thanks for going off on that tangent with me. But your thought.
That's what the underground's about, right? Is you just kind of go off and.
I do. You're so good at this type of discussion, and I know I read something. I was probably talking with one of my clients as well. So that really gets into that whole mission-based discussion that I wanted to have with you. But I want to go in the direction of dwindling income. You're a financial guy too. And you and I both work with, the C-suite and the boards, and we're in a dilemma this year. We have both a squeeze on our net worth and our net income, but we also have, growth that the credit unions never have expected. And so the question is going to become, I think it's twofold, and we won't get into the legislative part of it, but with action, with what we're seeing with the new administration, and we need to have NCUA continue to understand that a lower net worth means that we're giving back to the membership and that we're reserving. So there's those points. But how are we going to balance this stuff? Are we going to kind of swing the pendulum and say we've got to focus on financials, which we know we did in the quote Great Depression, or do you think that we could still do the right thing and tighten up and look at technology as part of our solution?
Yeah, I mean, I think that so growing up, I remember my father. I think I've shared with you in the past that I grew up as a preacher's kid. And I remember, in church and stuff, and my dad would, we talk about people that want to quote, there's a term called want to be a blessing. I want to be a blessing to somebody, right? So you maybe have heard this term, right? Being able to, and he'd say, a lot of people want to be a blessing, but they don't have their own house in order, so they can never really bless anybody else, right? And it's a really good point. And so so go look at like Bill Gates and look at Warren Buffett and look at some of these kind of leaders of business who their business was not a charitable business at all. I mean, they were savvy, shrewd, innovative, so forth, made billions and billions of dollars. And now that they got their house in order, and now they're able to make massive differences all around the world in all kinds of various causes. So I would say first and foremost is you have to make sure that you're in a position to be a blessing to somebody else. And so if you're not financially healthy, you may go out of business. So I'd say if you have to choose, you've got to buckle down and figure out to make sure how your business is going to be healthy and sustainable. Then you go and say, okay, now that I am in this position, now let me go and help and do the mission. So I think otherwise, if you're not around, there's no one to do the mission anyway, right? So I'd say if you're forced to choose, which sometimes we are, right? Sometimes various economic trends happen or downturns or whatever. So I would say absolutely you have to focus on the financial health first and foremost above everything else, just so that you can exist as a company. Now, what I would say is that is, generally speaking, whenever you look at that within a financial institution, that actually means, so maybe it's self-serving that I say that, because that generally means shifting more of your spend to technology, because there's nothing more efficient than that, right? I mean, you can, and we talked about this before, if I have a branch that costs me, I don't know, $1 million and then maybe a few $100,000 a year to staff, but when you look at the relative number of people and interactions that branch actually creates, it is incredibly expensive, orders of magnitude, so many times much more expensive than a technology channel that can serve the same amount. So I do think there's a little bit of, maybe my opinion is a self-serving one, and I'd say that being financially shrewd equates to spending, shifting more of those resources to the technology side of the service channel and not to the physical delivery channel. But I think that even though we have a few customers that don't have any branches, and we have a lot of customers that have branches that still serve members nationwide, there's still the majority of our customers that have massive budgets each year in their physical footprint. And so I think if you're going to cut something, I would I would vote for that.
Well, what I'm hearing is that they're going to repurpose. I mean, we're seeing some branches that'll turn into community centers, and they'll lease out portions of it. So I think we have to examine everything.
Yep,
it really
I
comes
like that.
down to that. And then when you talk about I love the idea of your own house has to be in order. I immediately went to my own house because I took it personally, and I reflected on, okay, is mine in order? But I do remember having, our own company for 25 years. We have always had to make sure that we're healthy in our consulting business and healthy in the relationships that we're doing, to be able to then volunteer, because it's coming directly out of our pocket. And so there's always that balance that you have. You and I've talked about this. I'm in business with my husband, and so he's the one that will quickly remind me, you have to make some money to be able to give it away.
That's right.
Okay, got it. So that
That's
makes
great.
us shrewd as well.
That's
So
right.
when we look to the future, one of the things that came up, and I'm going to throw you a little bit of a new question here, but you're talking about technology and you're talking about the use of it. And we've talked before about how it has to be seamless, and we cannot create any more things that people have to overcome. The last thing I want right now is an experience where I have to wait on hold, or I have to go to different systems and so on. So how are we going to make digital going forward more friendly, more warm, more relationship driven? Do you see us making that a priority?
Well, now, again, it probably depends on the systems that you use. I think a lot of technology out there is already warmer and friendlier and more relationship. And you see really AI playing a big piece in that, right? Because generally the things, whenever of course, these are just things coming off the top of my head. So someone watching this later will probably say, oh, well, there's these five other things that I can name that may fall in this category. But I would say the things that frustrate people are things like, I reach out, but then you don't know who I am. So I have to identify myself. That's one of the first things, is self-identification, and the problem with that and how long it takes just to get to the point to where you know who I am. And so that means if I'm on the call center and talking to you, or maybe I've called in and I'm waiting on hold. And so now you already started to see these systems, like American Airlines has been doing this for a long time. You call in, it recognizes your number. It says, hey, Stephen, how can I help you? Are you calling about this flight that you have tomorrow? That to me is a great example of being anticipatory, already identifies me, already can offer me some easy access or some easy solutions to what I'm probably calling about. You're starting to see this a lot with the chat bots that are out there now, which I think is really great. Whenever you click help on site, you'll go through, pick from a list, type your question, gives you some answers, pick. So, and really what we're seeing is we're seeing some great results from that. So there was I think we just did one of our customers that just rolled out kind of a voice and conversational SMS kind of chat bot, showed that of the people that went to that channel to do that, like 80% of them never ultimately bailed out to say, let me talk to somebody. So they was able to handle like 80%. Now, I'm not saying that eliminated 80% of the calls. I'm saying of the people that decided to try the chat feature, of those 80% said, okay, great, it solved it. And so and you're seeing that those things are starting out becoming more sophisticated. So they're recognizing your IP, they're recognizing your phone, they're recognizing your phone number and so forth. Obviously, some of them now you're seeing a voice print to do that. I'll tell you, a really slick one I saw, one of our customers is kind of betaing this or actually using this. There's a company out there now that is actually creating kind of a biometric profile on you based upon the way that you move around your phone or move around your keyboard and mouse. So you actually have a profile just like your fingerprint. So like how fast you scroll, how fast you swipe, how long you hold a tap, all those things, actually they're building a model on you that says this is Sue. And so if someone, for instance, tries to log into the system and they're using their phone a little differently, or maybe like they're on their keyboard, and let's say you always tab between fields and this person's clicking between fields, like they recognize those types of things. So you're seeing the technology come about to where one, we can be identified through all kinds of ways. So I think that's first and foremost one of the really cool things, whether it be for fraud mitigation or just for self-identification for service. So I think that's a big one right there. And then I think that the other one that comes into play, I think the second thing would be the kind of interconnectedness of systems and be able to empower, whether it be the call center rep or the AI chatbot or whatever it happens to be able to access and perform functions. So what you're still seeing right now is a lot of times those systems are tied into maybe one or two of the back office systems, but not all of them. So maybe I can tell you your balance, but if you want to know the status of that loan, you have to call and wait in line, right? No, I want to be able to check the status of my loan. I want to be able to order a new card. I want to be able to check my balance. I want to be able to make a payment. I want to be able to transfer some money. So I think one of the things you're still dealing with that creates a obstacle to creating true user friendliness is that what I talked about earlier was you still got 15 to 20 back office systems that are the systems of record and the processing systems, and those aren't all connected to each other. That's a lot of what Alchemy does, is spend a lot of time connecting those systems to us and then trying to orchestrate between them. But until you get more of those things tied together, those solutions that you have to lower friction are always going to have some limitations on them because maybe they only talk to 2 or 3 of the systems that you have. So I think you have to have more of the interoperability for that to happen. But I think the technology on the front end is already kind of getting there, and it's actually the back end and systems tying all those into where that cool new thing on the front end can actually access it. That right now is probably the biggest issue. That's why you see companies like Amazon doing such an amazing job. I mean what they're able to do from a service perspective and order perspective and suggestions, and I mean it's just amazing. But they adopted a philosophy really early on of everyone has to use APIs to talk to each other. And so what you've just seen is that their whole company and their whole product and service and delivery channel has been built upon APIs and interoperability. And so we don't quite have that yet in the bank and credit union space. There's some, you see some of it, but there's still a lot of segmentation and silos. And until you solve that, it's always going to bubble up to the user experience ultimately and create friction.
So talk to me about any new partnerships in 2021, anything that Alchemy is going to be coming out with that we should know about?
In 2021, well, since I was just talking about this issue of identification, I guess I'll plug one thing that we're actually just top of mind because it's actually, we've been betaing it for a couple of months and it's actually being released this quarter. And that is a product called Digital ID, where basically the way it works is you call into the call center and there's other use cases for this as well, but let's just say the most common one that people can kind of connect to, when you call into the call center, a call center representative being able to immediately validate you by sending a push notification to your phone, and then you touch that push notification, the launches the mobile app, does the Face ID or Touch ID, and then they can immediately say, so I could say, Sue, do you have your iPhone with you? Yes. All right, I'm going to send a push there. You touch it, opens it up, validates you, and I say, okay, Sue, how can I help you? And there's a lot of other use cases for this besides just the call center use case, but basically using a biometrically trusted device as a way to validate non-digital transactions. So you could be thinking about this in the branch, you think about this at maybe at an ATM, you think about this. So it's really kind of taking what people are probably used to for years to be able to do like a VPN login and things like that. They're used to kind of this push and validation with an app. It's really just taking that concept within the digital banking channel. So you already see certain versions of this where I know a lot of institutions now, they'll send you a one-time passcode via text or something to try to validate. Yeah, the only problem is, I mean, text isn't always the best and not necessarily always secure. And so this is just a much more secure way of doing that kind of same thing. So that's a new product that we're rolling out. We've actually kind of pre-sold quite a bit of that. And then I think with some of the partnerships, we just recently announced one with Turnkey Lender. We're looking at enhancing some of the partnerships we have with several of our partners today with some of the additional products that they have. But I don't want to get too ahead of myself on any of those things. But I would say that we have our plate is very full. We'll be doing, something like 20 to 30% more than we did in 2020. So we are not slowing down in any way, shape, or form. I mean, the industry as a whole is very exciting. There's a lot of innovation happening, obviously, among the fintechs and the mega banks that are out there. And as you can imagine, that forces us to adapt very quickly and to ensure that our clients stay competitive and that they can make sure they keep pace with the new expectations that are obviously going to be thrust upon them. So it's really an exciting time right now to be in the fintech space. And so there's just a lot of really neat, innovative things that I think are going to change the way we do banking for the rest of our lives.
But I was thinking that you mentioned the fact last year that identification was going to continue to be critical. So it's exciting for me to see within a year basically that you're responding to that and making that available as part of what you're doing. So from a business partner standpoint, I think sometimes we look at our partners as vendors. And I believe strongly that any system, and again, back to the ecosystem, the whole idea of the grassroots and who we all are committed to, that when we all come together, we're critical to each other, the success of organizations. And so when you talked about fintech, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the fintech space, but it's also starting and dying and shifting and moving and, a lot of things happening there. So the trusted partners that are in it for the long haul become even more critical. So two things. What are those two ideas into action that you want to just say to the audience for us today?
Two ideas into action. Well, I would say, I sound like a broken record on this, Sue. So I don't have a lot of new things. So I would say until the other two things are done, maybe we don't have two new things. But I would say from our discussions, I would say that the first would be, if you're in one of those positions where you're having to choose and you're saying, well, gosh, we're supposed to make this kind of difference in our community or support this, but yet we've got some of the financial things, always retrench and get financially healthy first before you do that. And I know that, and maybe you feel like you may take a reputational hit for it or something like that, but again, you're no good to anybody if you're not in business. So I would say that would be kind of the first thing if people are struggling with that at all. And I know sometimes that happens because especially with a lot of credit unions, like their boards and stuff are made up of folks that are saying, hey, this is the reason we exist, and say, yeah, but we still need to exist in order for us to still have that reason. So maybe that would be the first thing, is if anything, is to encourage anyone out there that may be struggling with that to feel emboldened with that thought. And I think that the other one is this. I mean, we're going to state some more, is the digital transformation side, is that I think that this year opened a lot of eyes, or maybe woke a few people up, for instance, that that may not have that have kind of said, yeah, we're doing some things on tech. Yeah, we're getting a new system, buying a new digital banking system or a new app or a chat bot or whatever. That's not digital transformation. It's not a tool that you buy and then you're there. And so I think what you'll probably see is that people have had to take a really hard look at everything that they do, their entire delivery channel, and say, did this kind of thing of closing our branches, was it just a minor blip, or did this have a major impact on our organization? And I will tell you, unfortunately, we have a lot of great customers where I would tell you that this was not a huge impact. They were already kind of ahead of the game. They were already focused on pushing everything digital. And so in some ways for them, they may have said, hey, this is great. We've got to shut our branches down for a month or two just to be able to kind of, reinforce the point. But there are a lot of organizations, especially when you look at the bottom 8,000 in terms of financial institutions, kind of below 300 million assets, 200 million assets on the credit union side, that still just have not really woken up to the idea that just will not cut it. And because we've had kind of times of plenty over the last decade, it really lulls people into a false sense of security that, hey, it must be what I'm doing must be working, right? I'm doing okay. I think that this the pandemic and the new kind of realities of digital is really a wake up call, and that people are gonna, if they're hoping that ultimately it goes back to how it was, and that's what they're banking on to not change, they're in for a world of hurt. So I would say adapt or die.
That's right. And you know what? I think that what you're talking about applies to cultures, because I work with, as I mentioned, quite a few of your clients. And one of the things I find that it's that the member-facing part of the transition, the conversion, all of that is done, through the help of the partners and stuff, very systematically. But what I find is that our own people haven't adapted, and so you've got to do that as well. So we're in a world where we've all been forced to adapt. So all of us, I think, need to look at it and say, what did I do well individually? What's my culture? What do we need to do to enhance it? How can we get Sue to remember to go off, audio and go
off
back
mute?
On? I mean, it's all that stuff. And the only thing I'm going to say to you, dude, is that it was early this morning.
That's true. It was early. It still is early for you.
I know.
I'm already 2 cups of coffee and a bowl of oatmeal down. I'm already, you're
yeah. And I grabbed mine, came running in here. So no, but that is, it's a perfect example, because we're busy. I mean, our business has grown, as has yours, and I'm finding that people are busy. This isn't a time. In fact, I heard somebody say that we're in what they call compassion fatigue. It's like we're not as accepting now of the interruptions to our meetings, some of the things that happen, and that's probably going to be an issue here for a few months. But we're moving on, and even though the world isn't completely moving on, we're trying to adapt our businesses. So
yeah, that's probably my biggest fear of this. I'm a pretty social person, and I think, when I look at my work day now, it's meeting, right? And so you get very little just kind of, I'd say, random or spontaneous kind of interactions with folks. And I don't think people realize how much of those little interactions, even if it's just walking by or talking to someone for a minute at the water cooler or whatever, how much that it builds empathy and compassion for people, patience and things like that. And I feel it, I can feel more of the crankiness a little bit, and more of the sharpness and shortness and things like that. And you have to be really, really intentional to self-correct that and really to self-examine that. But I would say that's probably the biggest thing that when I say I worry about, not just for Alchemy or companies, but really just for our society, is that, that interpersonal connection is a lot of what creates empathy and compassion for each other. And so I'm hoping that we can, get back to more of that as soon as possible. But yeah, you kind of feel it, almost eating at the edges there. And it's something that I don't like to see. And it's one of the negatives of this whole thing. But I'm also very optimistic that we're going to be just fine.
Well, I think, we have the opportunity to spend some time doing these types of kind of vulnerable and having some fun and laughing at ourselves a little bit. I think that all helps. And, the Underground will have our event on March 1st, and you'll be part of it. And one of the things that we're going to tackle there too is mental health, and not just from, the pain of it, but also the importance of it from a positivity standpoint. And as you just indicated, we have to stay positive, and we need our colleagues to help us with that. We need our families to help us with that. And I have to realize that just because I've been on Zoom for 12 hours doesn't mean I can't go home and be nice and want to talk to somebody. I'm talked out, but I'm not, So I think,
you got it.
Yeah, we've got some good stuff planned this year. And so thank you very much.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. All right. Well, I'll see you soon.
Yes, it sounds great.